try to hold you tightly by my side when all is crashing down. You'll never.
All right, mate. So, it's been a couple of weeks, eh?
Helena, I think, was the last one we did. Mixture of circumstance, and I mean, obviously, when you go every week, there's going to be weeks where it just doesn't happen. You know what I mean? And thankfully, they're few and far between. But I think we're about 2 or 3 weeks since we actually caught up. Maybe like a week since we put anything out.
Getting some fucking cracking feedback for the shorts, man. I mean. Had a few DMs and stuff off of people, but I think sometimes when you're talking about mental health,
when I watched it back, there was definitely some of your more controversial shit that you cut out, which is quite surprising.
I think I
don't think anything else was particularly controversial.
I didn't want to trigger people, but I think when you're talking about mental health, like, and we were talking quite a lot when we were setting up the studio here, like, things are very specific to people, and when you talk about it in general terms, it can annoy certain people. It's good to hear people like really be like, oh, I really enjoyed that, I would like more, so we'll definitely
the feedback on the channel was quite good as well. Obviously, one of the other reasons for it, and we touched on it in a couple of recent episodes, was obviously my sort of poor mental health. Like, the last sort of fortnight or so, obviously I've just been trying to take some action, so, you know, unfortunately this wasn't priority number one in a lot of senses. So I think a mixture of two, but we're back to it. We've got some good guests lined up for the next couple of weeks. Like, I am absolutely like choking to get into like the disinformation stuff with the academics we've got booked up. I think that's going to be a lot of, well, fun. It's probably no the word for everybody else, but I mean, I've been like in about it for like quite a few weeks now. And obviously, I think the last time we spoke, I'd said that, you know, I'd just kind of really started discovering like YouTube as like an actual content provider rather than just somewhere where I go to Google something when it's broke, how do I fix it, or like watching Cunts Four or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and I watched a couple of lectures on, you know, the rise of disinformation and, you know, quote unquote fake news, which we're just going to throw in the episode or the show because anybody who's an expert on this field absolutely despises, and I mean like viscerally despises the term sort of fake news. So we might have a bit of fun with that down the line.
I've got so many questions that I'm just not going to ask because we need to leave it for the episode. But surely that's got to do with the Trump Association, because
I think it is.
Right.
There's a lot of that in there. It's no. I think a lot of time it's not really accurate as well because, you know, as we'll get into it, like disinformation is its strongest when it's no fake, when it has an element of truth, and that's why people buy into it. That's why it fucks with people, is because proper disinformation has an element of truth, but it's like fake news, you would assume it's all nonsense, and that's probably where maybe part of the gripe comes in. But again, we'll get it down the line. We've obviously got another guest as well who has written the book Checkpoint on the effects of gaming on mental health after the back of one of the shots. I'm quite interested to get into that one.
Me too, absolutely, because it's one of the things that, and I don't know if I kind of touched on it in the shot, but I've always assumed that gaming's a bad thing. It's one of the unproductive things that you can do just to waste time, and I'm looking forward to having a counterpoint on that, you know, maybe as
Definitely.
much as your counterpoint with like the Minecraft and stuff like that, and I was like, when I think about it, actually it can be cathartic. I'd like some science, just like to hear where the science is on
Absolutely. I mean, one of the other things on YouTube I discovered is a lot of these sort of streamers, what I didn't give them credit for is like, I've got into watching like hours of people streaming DayZ, because it's just a pure open world experience survivor thing, and it's just really interesting to me.
So what's DayZ?
It's a zombie survival thing where the online co-op mode is just a big open world map, and people build bases and they do raids and they fight each other, and it's all about scavenging and building, and like people actually like, and this is one of the benefits that I really want to get into when we speak about gaming more down the line, is that real communities have popped up around this. So like something that I, again, was very dismissive, like, oh fuck, some pleb streaming to like a couple of hundred people about, you know, Football Manager or zombie games or whatever the fuck it is. When in actual fact they're like real, like tight-knit communities that are actually pop up around about these. And I think those, because we've always talked about the benefits of community and being involved in your community when, you know, like maybe doing service and these types of things to actually help improve your mental health or how you just feel in general. And those communities are something I've kind of discovered through this process. But on the sort of wider technology side of things, like I have got like pure super into like some of the futurism shit, like the off the back of like gaming and disinformation, and I think the algorithm is now taking me down, various rabbit holes. But like,
you're listening to Grimes and getting a chub for Elon Musk.
I know, is that way? Like, I don't really want to go anywhere near Elon Musk because I'm already fighting the urge to be a Bond villain most of the time anyway. You know what I mean? Like, but. No, so I seen a thing where a guy was talking one of these lectures again. It just skipped on. And he was talking about, I can't remember like transhumanism, right? And I don't know. We spoke previously, I think, about Project 2045. There's like a Ukrainian sort of Russian oligarch billionaire out there who's running. It's basically a grant that is designed to encourage somebody to invent the technology to digitize a human brain for 2045. This is his goal because he thinks this might be towards the end of his natural human lifespan, and he wants to use all this fucking money he's got to basically live forever, because that's what the world needs, is billionaires who live forever. I can't think of anything more we need. Do
you need to be a billionaire to want to live forever? Because the idea of living forever terrifies me.
One of the greatest solaces I've got in life is that one day I'll be dead.
This will end. That's as much as we're laughing, I'm no suicidal in any way, shape or form, but the idea that this life would be never ending is not a comfort to me.
No.
But there does seem to be this sort of, now we're getting into conspiracy theory, but there does seem to be this group of people that are trying to make themselves everlasting.
This is a legit thing. This guy has like prospectus and, like proper science people involved in trying to like digitize a downloadable version of a human brain that can then go into hardware. And it kind of marries in with this other transhumanism stuff that I've seen, where the lecture I seen in particular was about a guy for, I think it was DARPA, and then he was talking about how
DARPA
phone technology came for military, touch screens, GPS,
the internet.
The internet, all these things came for like the military experimenting with technology. And what he was doing was basically showcasing what the next generation of things are, and then discussing what sort of moral questions we need to answer before we really go and sort of fully explore this technology. And the example that he used was basically like a microchip that is implanted in somebody's brain. And it was the guy that he'd used, I think, was an army veteran who had been paralyzed for like the neck down in combat. And the guy had been obviously, really down and like depressed and suicidal and all these things, and caught wind of this research and volunteered for it as a means to like make his situation mean something, you know what I mean, like help push forward humanity. And the story of the wee personal story was really nice, but essentially what they did was they put a chip in his brain that then allowed him to interact with like a robotic arm, and this doctor could shake hands with a robotic arm and the guy would feel it because the actual,
holy shit, man,
he could sense touch, or there were sensors in the robotic arm that he could then control, and he's like drawn pictures, but a lot of it's framed in like virtual worlds where at one point he was flying like a simulation of like a fighter jet, and the guy was doing like barrel rolls and all sorts of stuff, and like his body is getting something resembling the sensation of movement and touch and all these other things as a result.
So like when he's doing that type of thing, is that the chip directly connected to some sort of virtual thing, or is it connected to the arm that's controlling?
So it can be either or. So there was examples in which there was an actual robotic arm where he was, at one point he was physically shaking hands with like Barack Obama while he was president. But then there was other footage they showed where they also used the chip to control virtual spaces and explore and, fly planes and all these other things. So
where's my robotic penis?
I'm sure we can get you one.
It's pretty much non-existent. I mean, it may as well be amputated. But no, like that's. I mean, we know. But I think we spoke about Neuralink and Elon Musk and his quest for this. But like you're saying, when DARPA get involved, shit tends to like really accelerate. They've got like the government money. It's not just.
Well, think about the shit they were talking about was during the Obama presidency. So Obama was president while he was shaking robotic hands with this paraplegic guy. So what was that like? We're talking 5, 6, 7 years ago at best. So think about where they are now if that's where they were then.
Aye,
you know what I mean?
absolutely. And I think DARPA no involved with Boston, whatever they're called, that are doing the robot.
Well, I mean,
dogs
almost
and stuff
certainly,
like that.
almost certainly. This is where my brain started to like really wonder on it, because we're in a space where there are people looking to find a way to digitally download and institute somebody's consciousness in sort of physical hardware. We have robotics that are at a fairly advanced level in certain respects, that are up, they're running, we're all seeing the fucking dancing robots and it's like, hey, it's cool, and you're like, so like what, Terminators can like...
Well, what about New York? Did you see the footage for New York?
Aye.
With the fucking, the search, they went in with a search dog that was a robot, and it looked like, I mean, the guy the guy that was operating the fucking robot dog came out and looked like an absolute gimp in a fucking army helmet, but it's kind of scary, man. It's like...
It looked dystopian as fuck. And I mean, you could, I think that in that particular instance, you could definitely see that like the residents were pure,
what
the fuck is this? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think the recent episode of Black Mirror helps in that respect, because one of those robot dogs, hunts down the lassie for the UK version of Shameless, whose name escapes me right now, but she's a phenomenal actress. And that is like one of the tensest sort of 50 minutes of TV I think I've ever seen. But it's kind of those questions that where my mind was wandered to, because, as I say, we're talking about downloading brains. We now have entirely robotic bodies that are capable of really advanced movement. We also have the ability now, potentially, for people to remotely interact, with these devices and ideas through this sort of neuroscience. And like, it's now time to ask the question, like, so we can do it, like,
where are we going with this? Like,
should we do it? You know what I mean?
Aye, well, that's it.
And
I mean, not a lot of times when it comes to science, is there enough morality asked? And one of the, I mean, you're saying there, like, consciousness, we don't even understand the consciousness that we've got just now, and we're already trying to digitise it. I suppose maybe if we digitise it, we'll understand it better. But I mean, that feels to me like we could end up fucking, I mean, what's Superman 3, where the jail's like a mad hologram that they trap people in and throw them into space, and you go in there and you'll just float about space for like 15 years and then you'll come back. Like, is that where we're going? I mean, it does seem scary, but the other thing that I'm thinking is that this is an inevitability. Like, we could have been sitting here in 85 going, where are we going with this internet? And this is very dangerous. And it's like, there's nothing that we can do to stop it. So you almost need to just go like that, hope that the people that are actually involved in creating it have some sort of moral question of like, what should we be doing with this? And
I think largely when it comes to exploration in science, the answer is if we can do it, we're kind of obliged to do it in some respects. So I think, as you say, somebody will take these steps to a more sort of natural conclusion, especially with like the way machine learning and AI and stuff like that is accelerating. The problems that we can't think our way around are now being thought around by machines and on our behalf again, you know what I mean? Like, so it's all like, I've been like deep in the rabbit hole on that one in the last week after, as I say, just that slide for like misinformation and whatever else we've been looking at to now. We've been like, holy fuck, like semi-conscious robots are going to come and fly planes and then chases and, all the pure,
I was thinking,
like, horrible things.
Yeah, I was thinking, well, you don't need the remote control for the drone if your chip can just connect it, and you can use like your motor skills to be like, I want the fucking plane to do this. And
so this is the more likely scenario that the guy for DARPA was explaining, was that it's actually, and this is the way he explained how they intend to use it, made me question, not that I don't already question the validity of any war or why we do it, but like this even more so than ever, was that the end goal seems to be to automate the war zone, or any war zone.
Remove human, just like life.
Aerial drones and, as you say, robots that, as you are controlled by an infantry soldier's brain chip 600 miles away or whatever it is. And I'm like, I think that's probably the only way we could make war even more pointless than it already is by having no physical stakes. You know what I mean? Like, what gives, or what I'm sure some would argue gives war a level of meaning, is the sacrifices that people make for ideas, for country, for family, for what they believe in at that point in time. But what is the point in war where you've got two sides who are just basically sending robots or drones to attack each other.
Pay-per-views, that's the fucking point.
It's just robot wars.
Right,
It's just
exactly,
fucking
like,
Craig Charles sitting commentating on World War
Sports
III.
going to be
you know what I
charging
mean?
you 25 quid to go and watch the Afghanistan conflict, and it's going to be like their robots are I mean, we're making fun of it, but at the same time, like, even worse, it could be like humans on the other side and robots. And
So that's probably
the places that were currently in active conflict, because
let's be
don't
honest
seem
with
to
you,
have the money.
I was going to say we don't tend to pick a lot of fights with countries that can afford robot armies. Which, you know, and even then we still don't win an awful lot of them, you know what I mean? Like, but that would be the nightmare scenario, is that you're rocking up to fight for whatever you believe in and somebody's got a sea of robots.
If you look at the current sort of climate and stuff, can you imagine, and 100% they will get it, imagine Israel had robots and they were literally guys with sticks and stones at the other side of whatever fucking, like, and they were just fucking, I mean, that scares the life out of me. And to think about, like, robot police officers, if you look at what's going on just now, I think, like what you were saying, like, war's pointless. And I think the recent conflicts that we've got, I think more and more people are coming to that conclusion of, like, what are we doing here? Like, as we get more information. And so this would just enable them to carry on their industry and their industrial war complex, but without having to convince young men predominantly to, like, put their lives on the line for fuck all. Because it used to be about religion and we're the good guys versus the bad guys, but that's very blurred now. That's very much.
It doesn't exist. I don't think it ever existed. I think outside of World War II, you know what I mean? Like, even World War One, that's looked back at as the Great War, was still. It was like
family feud,
monarchies arguing with each other. You know what I mean? Like, it was completely avoidable and fucking pointless. You know what I mean? Like,
and I think, like, when we talk about World War II, one of the big misconceptions is that we went out to, you know, stifle evil, and it's like not really true. But what happened was that he crossed a line. They were willing to let Hitler do what the fuck he liked in Germany.
So long as he stayed out everybody else's empires.
Stayed in his lane. And what happened was that he stepped out his lane, he got delusions of grandeur, stepped out his lane, and so they put him back in his fucking place. It had nothing to do with good versus evil. In fact, the active monarch in this country was a fucking Nazi. And Churchill has been quoted in saying that he admired Hitler and what he achieved in Germany economically and stuff. So it wasn't about good versus evil. That's how their, like, nice wee puppet, like, makers try and come up with these marketing ways of selling.
I think in hindsight we can see that there was a moral imperative to stop, like, Holocausts and stuff like that. But when it kicked off, it was about, he was now starting to risk encroaching on other people's empires, and that's
absolutely.
We did a full episode on Churchill where we looked at in detail with, and, you know, a qualified academic, that, you know, Churchill was about defending. He was trying to fight wars on, you know, Southeast Asia when, you know, people were wanting the D-Day landings and stuff like that. Like, he was very much about protecting the interests of the British Empire. And I think to a large extent they all were in that one. But again, with hindsight, we can see that it was moral. There was a moral imperative to do it. But again, I can't think of too many other, you know, like the rebellion in the Empire in the Star Wars movies is about probably the best example I've got of, like, an actual just war, because you're just like, they don't really exist, you know what I mean? Like, no in actual reality anyway. So that's one of the rabbit holes I've been doing while I've been kind of, like, building back up and trying to sort of put the pieces back together. So I don't know if, like, thinking about semi-conscious, you know, robots controlled by brain chips was necessarily the best thing to get into whilst I was, like, feeling like shit. So I did not help with, like, my ominous feelings of, like, impending doom, you know what I mean? Like, but at the same time, the science is fucking incredible. Like, so it is, like, the actual capability of this shit that is, up until the last 5 years, like, pure sci-fi, you know what I mean? Like, is now, like, frighteningly close to reality.
Well, I mean, if we keep on that sort of chain of thought and we talk about the pill and all of the official shit that's been coming out in America about, like, this unidentified flying object, they don't call it UFO anymore, but they call it let me find out, because
I'm with you.
The change in language is fucking hilarious. It's just to, like, actually
the pot has been, like, boiling on that one pretty,
I think we've
like, increasingly in recent years, you know what I mean? Like, it does seem like, but then I don't know, man. I think as well, my cynical mind goes to, like, just the military industrial, like, posturing, because, you know, as you say, they want excuses to build and sell new tech, and what could be more convincing than a campaign for the Air Force and the military that says there's shit in our skies that we don't understand and we don't know.
Absolutely.
Know what I mean?
They're calling it unexplained aerial phenomena.
Right.
So
I've heard that term before.
This is what they've changed it to, and
try to make it sound more like legit than UFO.
I think you're saying, the sort of cynicism starts to creep in, because there's a guy out there that basically has explained exactly what this is, and he did it in like 1978, and he get called a fucking nutcase and like get pursued by the American government. But like this is basically like the manifestation of like Bob Lazar's whole sort of narrative. And
I think they're still raiding his house like fucking 30, 40, 50 years later or whatever it is.
So Bob Lazar's thing is, and I suppose that we'll get our opinion on it, is that they found it and they reversed engineered it because he was actually part of that. That's what he thinks. I don't know what I believe about that. I don't know how believable that is. Is Bob Lazar some sort of like CIA plant? Like I don't even know. I mean, he's done so many. He's done Rogan and stuff like that. But I think that this is science suppression or technology suppression, where they've had this technology since then and they just don't know how to put it out. And now what they're doing is they're drip feeding it out, and it's some sort of like advanced military equipment that they basically just can't say that they've got.
I mean, and the kind of like Occam's razor type thing where, the closest. So I've also been watching loads of physics shit.
Right, okay.
And like, the closest other star system to us is like, so far away that other civilizations would need to be so far more advanced than us to have crash landed in the 60s or 70s or whenever was Roswell, what, 40-something, 47?
But it was when they were doing the testing of the atomic bomb, so
right.
It was just before the end of the Second World War.
And they think that there's the whole sort of zoo theory where somebody's coming down and being like, oh, what the fuck are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, as if, nuclear capability is some sort of benchmark for, I don't know, observation for somewhere else. I think it's more likely that there is some really fucking wild shit going on out there in like theoretical science, and there always has been some wild ideas, and I think maybe there's just a chance that somebody somewhere accidentally like tripped over one of these wild ideas for non-combustible propulsion or whatever it is, and they've spent the last 60 years trying to make it work properly, you know what I mean, like where somebody's had a really out there left field scientific idea, and when they've tried to make it a practical reality, they had some success that has taken them time to like hone in. But again, I think that these phenomena are explained by shit that governments are doing somewhere, whether it's the American government or whoever, I don't know, who knows.
I think if it wasn't the Americans, they wouldn't be releasing this stuff out. If it was the Russians or the Chinese that were fucking flying these non-combustible like wild technology over America, because it's American Navy people that have seen it all, that have been documenting it. And that's the other thing that sort of makes me question it, is like, why would they test it in airspace where they know that fucking F-16s or whatever are flying about? Like, that's where you start to go, oh, what is this? Like, what
logically, it must be that if they're not actively trying to shoot this shit down, it's because somebody somewhere knows it's theirs. You know what I mean?
But that, again, to me, I mean, where are we going with this? Like, this thing's apparently travelling at like fucking 25,000 miles an hour and shit, like dropping for fucking 10,000 feet to 3 feet in like a second. And stopping. But
underwater and all these things as well.
Yeah, man.
Seeing like all sorts of reports. I think it's really interesting in the sense that these official channels are now starting to have like public conversations about it. It's one of the things that's been out in the ether for, as we say, more than half a century. But to actually hear these conversations happening in like official channels is definitely the interesting part for me, because it does feel as though the scene is trying to be set for something. Because,
well, this is it, isn't it?
If it's yours, and you why would you would maybe want to give other countries a flash it. I mean, obviously, a number of years ago, Israel, when they, wanted the world to know they had the atomic bomb, but didn't want to take any credit for it, there was a mysterious nuclear explosion out in some sea somewhere that everybody on the face of the planet knew was Israel, but Israel were like, it's not us. I mean, we don't have nuclear weapons.
Wink, wink.
We don't have nuclear weapons. And like every other nuclear power was like, well, we have protocols in place where we all know it wasn't any of the rest of us.
Aye,
you know what I mean? Like,
Israel were sitting at the table, the rest of the world were looking at them and going, was that you? And they were like, no, and looking at Palestine, giving them a wee wink and just being like, you're fucking for it, pal, like,
so
if you fucking trying me.
there is instances where you want the enemy to have a glimpse of this wondrous technology that you have and they don't, so there might be like a level of that involved in it, but I'm very much in the like terrestrial technology that the general population has no meaningful understanding of.
There's some fucking crazy shit about, like, since Reagan, the Americans have been investing trillions in like fucking technology to try and like basically own space. They think that the country that owns space is going to basically just rule the planet. So
absolutely.
I mean, that's been in place, and they've got fucking lasers and all that up there. Like, it's supposed to be all sorts of mad crazy shit up on the satellites.
Well, I mean, this is what this Space Force is. I know we joked about Space Force under the sort of Trump administration, because, you know, everything that they did was in some way hilarious or just horrible. And like, we kind of always sneered a wee bit at like the Space Force, you know, and obviously you've had the thing with Steve Carell where they take the piss out of it and stuff like that as well. That, it become a bit of a joke, but the actual theory behind it is, like you say, years in the making, where it's about infrastructure. So it's about communications, it's about GPS, it's about, you know, as you say, all the various bits and bobs of hardware that's up there being protected, and having China get a satellite close enough to hack one of their satellites and interrupt communications or feed, as you say, misinformation or whatever it is down the tubes. So there is like a legit actual like reason for the conversation to be happening. Like, you know, all the fucking uniforms and badges and everything, all that nonsense that happened during Trump was just branding, which is what Trump does anyway. Is he brands shit his image or whatever. But I think the Air Force had largely been doing a lot of this stuff already anyway. Or their Air Force Space Corps, whatever the fuck they were called.
Aye, for sure, man. I mean,
so
that's where all the astronauts came for. They all came for the Air Force, didn't they?
Because they're the only ones capable of handling the sort of physical demands of it, essentially. But this was all in place until Trump came in and was like, Space Force. You know what I mean? But there is an actual like grown-up reason for it.
I think Space Force was just something that was just in the pipeline that he had to just put out. You know, I don't think there was anything kind of stopping that. You know, but what do you think, right? Because I'm getting older. I'm starting to think that one world government's kind of like an inevitability, and that so all that sort of like fight against that, it's like, well, what are we fighting against? You know, we're all human beings. Why would we not all want to be connected? And we live in a global world anyway. But based on the coronavirus shit, right, I don't know if people are ready to know it all. There's part of me's kind of like, they should be telling us everything that's going on. Why are they no fuck it? It's taxpayer money that funds all this shit. Why are the privileged few privy to the information and the technology, and what are the actual capabilities that exist in the world? But then there's a part of me just on the history of the last 18 months, which is like, we are clearly not capable of dealing with that amount of fucking information, because this is clearly real. It's clearly killing hundreds of thousands of folk, and yet people are still being like, well, I don't know anybody that's died it, and so it's no real, like, circumstantial shit. So if they were to come out and go, oh, listen, guys, like, sorry. See, since the 70s, we've had this fucking type of engine that it's non-combustible, you know, whatever, no electric, nothing actually is pulling or pushing. It just moves, and it can just shift, and, like, people would just be like, what, you know, I think people would actually like just need to wear nappies.
It's the one that if they come out and went, we accidentally invented this 40 years ago and we've spent the last 4 decades trying to make it work properly and now it does, the instant reaction would be fucking, oh, there's aliens and blah, blah, blah. Like, so I don't think if there was a legit answer for that anybody would ever believe it. And I think, again, as we'll go into probably in the coming weeks with the disinformation episode, obviously coronavirus disinformation is going to be, you know, one of the things we absolutely touch on during that conversation. But information has always been dangerous. Like, one of the examples in the lecture was like, fake news is no a new thing. Like, the term disinformation was coined by Stalin, you know what I mean, disinformatia. But then he actually like promoted or used an example where it was a ancient Egyptian warlord or, you know, king or whatever, you know, what do they call them?
Pharaohs.
Pharaohs, that's the word I was looking for there. And this guy marched to, the border of what is now Israel and Palestine, and, was like, this is mine now, and they're like, is it fuck? And whatever that country was called at that point in time, pushed him back and kicked his arse.
Right.
But in his tomb, in his, big fucking swanky tomb, they found, like, 3,000 years later, the story of him basically single-handedly winning this battle. So this guy knew that as a pharaoh, like, somebody at some point in the future would find or be aware of his tomb.
Right.
And put this story up on the wall about how his men get beat back, and it was basically him who got back in and, like, drove the men forward and took the head of the other, and the guy got his ass kicked and, like, chased all the way straight back to fucking Egypt, you know what I mean?
Okay.
It was a rout in history books, but this guy was like, no, history is going to remember me, so history is going to have to remember this story the way I tell
so
it
it's
as
like
well.
Egypt's been like fucking North Korea. It's like, we won the World Cup and we've went to Mars. And
so it's 3,000 years plus, you know what I mean? So I'd imagine that whilst, for as long as humans have been able to communicate with each other, there's been people trying to, like, fucking send mixed signals, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, and I'll caveat this with saying, I don't know how exactly true this is, but apparently, like, the British Crown lost a lot of its power because, like, the Rothschild family came back and told them that Napoleon had beat Wellington at Waterloo, and basically, like, your land's worthless, but listen, what we'll do is we'll take it off your hands for, like, a cut price.
Okay.
And we'll deal with the French when they get here. And all the British monarchs and lords went, oh, great. And then the word get back 2 days later, we won. And they were just sitting there going, aye, but we own all that land, by the way. And that's how the Rothschilds really got a real stronghold on, like, Europe, was through this disinformation. Like, so it can be very... No, it can just be very dangerous, isn't it? Like, if information.
The Rothschilds
power,
are also somebody who are, like, subject to loads of probably disinformation. So anytime I hear anything Rothschild, I just
switch
like
off a wee bit.
No, I just kind of take it with that sort of pinch of salt, because there's real subtleties to the disinformation about them that is very anti-Semitic and stuff like that I'm just really careful
let's have a wee Google at that and see if there's anything that comes up that isn't, like, rightwing.com and but I'm sure when I where I heard this Waterloo, it wasn't anything particularly like.
Well, I mean, there's thousands of examples. There was the guy on D-Day.
It's on Wikipedia, so it's true. Right.
So the fellow on D-Day in Portugal, a Nazi officer in Portugal who was actually like a British double agent, and whilst landing vessels were landing at Normandy, he was feeding information to the Nazis that the Brits were coming through Portugal via North Africa in about, like, 2 days. So I mean, the reason that the D-Day landings were as successful as getting the Allies a foothold in France was because some guy in Portugal was feeding the Nazis a whole pile of bullshit.
Right.
So it's an active thing that is now. But this is why I want to get into it now, and I think we've also had, like, the SNP release a report on it in the last week or so, which we'll obviously need to have a look at before we speak to the lads that are coming in. But it's very much a military thing that we thought about. Obviously, Stalin and the KGB and these guys changed that in the 50s and 60s and really used it to, like, where the early incarnation of where we are now, like that divide and conquer that we talk about, where they take wedge issues and use them to, like, explode gaps in populations. And this is now a governmental tactic where Matt Hancock can tell us that there was an PPE shortage and look you straight down the face in the camera, and it's a military, an overtly military tactic that is now being weaponised against the general public. And it's not just being weaponised against the general public by our sort of quote unquote enemies, it's being weaponised against us by our own fucking government. You know what I mean? And all the talking heads and all the pundits and all the, friendly columnists and journalists and, who just amplify this fucking bullshit that is allowing absolute, as Hancock. What was it called? A fucking India? What was it? The Cummings shit. He was like, he's a half-wit or something like that.
Who said that?
This Cummings has released text messages with Johnson talking about Hancock.
I called him a half-wit, and he said that was stress that caused him to call you an idiot. It's like, no, maybe he thinks, maybe Boris Johnson isn't quite as much an idiot as what we think he is, and he can see, or either that or you know your own. You know what I mean?
But I mean, these guys can't even go on with each other long enough, but they're weaponising this constant sort of culture war tactic to provide cover. Well, everybody's sitting fucking arguing about how some fucking Oxford uni took down a picture of the Queen. Like, who gives a fuck? Like, honesty, fuck, who cares? You know what I mean? Like, 2 days worth of fucking conversation if you're on social media, which is why in the last fortnight I run a lot over social media, and I've not been on social media because I could handle semi-conscious robots, but I just couldn't handle fucking Twitter. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
but this is
stuff
that
it's churning us. It's keeping us in a constant, in a place of constant discomfort, a constant motion, and it's deliberate. And now we need to get to a point where we can actually educate people. So there's, you know, obviously the Greens talked about media literacy for young kids. It's something that happens in a number of Scandinavian countries, and we need to start to, like, I remember in school where I was taught to, like, think about whether or not a source was credible, how to, you know, look at publications and all these. And I remember, like, this was something that was important that we had today. I don't know if that's maybe no longer the case in schools or what. I don't know, or if that's been the case for a while. But it feels like it's something that we need to, in the modern world, have maybe a grip on. Like, we need to have a better grip on what people are doing with our data, mate, and all these things.
I had a prime example of this, a real example of this the other night, where Sharon was sitting raging about something, and I was like, what is it? And she ranted about this thing, and I was like, well, is it real? And she was like, she showed me it, and I was like, that's a screenshot, like, go and Google that, is that real? Googled it, it's not real. And I was like, you need to do this. I was like, see, but there needs to be this sort of this sort of buffer that comes in place before you start getting angry about shit, where you actually take 10, 15, I mean, it literally took her 30 seconds. That's not digging my bird.
Absolutely not.
But just this new way of being that you kind of need to go, oh, wait a minute.
It's designed to get that reaction from her. That content is designed and deliberately put out there to cause that visceral, you know what I mean?
So you just take that step back and just look at it and go, right, how real is this? And you find out that it's a load of shite, and you're like, oh, great.
What we have in common as human beings is being exploited for likes, for clicks, for whatever it is. So I think that's definitely something that we need to be more conscious in addressing. I think among some of the other, you know, sort of technical stuff that we've been talking about, you know, technology-based stuff, like, it's very sort of pertinent now.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Well, what, 24 hours after fucking Scotland getting put out of the Euros, so I think maybe have a wee chat about how we felt it went. I mean, I kind of, I'll be honest, right? I've only really supported the Scottish national team since 2014. I think I was quite surprised to find out there was quite a lot of other Celtic supporters predominantly that made that shift during the independence referendum. It's like your politics changed.
Probably Strachan being in charge didn't hurt either.
Might be that.
You know what I mean? Especially when he started picking Celtic players.
But absolutely. I mean, the thing that put me off, you know, I'd seen a couple of people sort of going about, like, Celtic supporters supporting the SFA corruption and all this sort of stuff. The thing that really put me off it was I went to a Scotland game in 2009, and Barry Robson was getting called all the Fenian bastards under the sun when he came off the bench by the Tartan Army, and I just thought, okay, right, it was clearly no for me, you know, like, this isn't what I want. And also, I went to sit in my seat, and there was a guy there that was basically like, I'm a member of the Tartan Army, you can go and just find another fucking seat at a sold-out game. And I think there was about fucking 40 of them standing there, you know, like, me and my mate just went, right, well, we'll just go. We stood at the back. It wasn't a great experience, but, you know, started following them again, you know, started to get a wee bit more patriotic after post 2014. And I was quite disheartened with the amount of people that seemed disappointed. I thought, I mean, we only scored one goal in that, right? But listen, this is the first time we've been at a major tournament since 1998, right? Yeah. And to expect some sort of positive, like, qualification into the next round. Now, I know that it was kind of like on the cards, but And there was a video of a guy down at the fan zone booting fuck out a table. It's like, mate, like
that was hilarious. The moment after the
he tried to, he missed it. But it's kind of like, look, how can we not just be like happy that we got there, happy that we performed to a certain level? It looks like we've got the startings of a really, really good football team in a national sense, and let's not get upset and angry. Now, I understand if people are like, oh, I'm a bit disappointed. I was disappointed last night as well.
Yeah.
But we clearly get beat by the better team. I mean, that second half, they fucking...
Aye, there's a reason they're World Cup finalists.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like,
and perspective on the fact that World Cup finalists and stuff, and I just felt really sort of like, come on, guys, like, can we not just be like, right, let's qualify for this fucking World Cup, and we made a good showing ourselves. Aye. We weren't embarrassed. We got a draw at England at Wembley, which is a tough ask, and we just fell short of potentially giving ourselves a chance of qualifying. You know?
I think it's definitely a learning experience. I think it's going to be a learning experience for the fans. It's going to be a learning experience for the players, and I hope that it's a learning experience for the manager as well, because I think it was great to get there. Loads of emotion, you know, particularly in the playoffs. Like you and I both sort of vaguely knew Davy Marshall growing up, so having him getting that
vaguely knew, Matt, I kept him out of the primary fucking school football team, I think.
I stayed across the street from him and he's brought but at the same time, I wouldn't, we've not had contact in 20 years, so it wouldn't be fair to say we don't know him. We grew up running about him and knew the family and that. So I was really pleased for him to get those moments with the penalty saves in the playoffs and that, because I know he's had rough patches with Scotland, particularly in the early days where he couldn't buy a clean sheet with Scotland for loving their money, but it was as much about the defence in front of him as it was ending today with him. But the fact that he's now getting to the later stages of his career where he's actually established himself as a bit of kind of like Scotland legend, and the conversations about how do we replace Davy Marshall, I'm really pleased for him in that sense.
On a personal level, and especially you see a guy that literally lived across the street for you, went to Bayfair schools. You want to take it? No. Went to both our primary and secondary school, and like you're saying, I mean, I couldn't be prouder of the guy. Really,
Aye, definitely. He's definitely incredible. Had a cracking club career, and you know, been around the block and stuff like that.
I mentioned I kept him at the primary school football team.
Only every time we ever have a conversation about the lad. The lad, he's like 37
I think it was
or something.
Only once, but you know, claim to fame.
The rest of the squad, I mean, Lyndon Dykes and Shea Adams seem as though, you know, in the qualifying rounds and the Nations League that they're of a competent level to contribute. But I think when you get to tournament football, we probably need a wee bit more quality in the front third, and I don't know where we're finding that right now. You know, Chatterley Griffiths was a bit laughable for me. A guy can't get yourself fit in a year for Celtic. He has no right.
It's a real shame. It's a real shame. I watched him on open goal, and they asked him, you know, did you expect? And he was like, no. You know, he was like, obviously there's that wee tinge of hope, and you're disappointed when you get that phone call. Just the actual fact that he got the phone call for the Scottish national representative to tell him that he was in the squad tells you that he was in the running. Like, in one way, shape or form. But see, for that
if
guy,
he can get himself fit, he's welcome back. He's one of the most naturally talented goal scorers I think we have in the country.
I think we really missed him.
You know
I think he would have been a fit Lee Griffiths.
He can't get through 90 minutes, he's no good to us.
He would have been a real asset to that squad. He would have been what I feel is kind of like really missing. Like really, like you're saying, an
actual finisher.
And I think like watching, my personal opinion on it is that Lyndon Dykes did his job perfectly.
Oh, aye.
And Shea Adams, like you said, just falls short. And he's young, I think. He's a young guy, so he can develop, you know. Definitely. It's no saying, no writing the guy off, but
not at all.
I'm with you. I think if we had a natural goal scorer with the amount of chances that we got in that first game, especially against the Czechs, I reckon we would have scored. And I think if we'd have scored in that game at the right time, and not to say that would have happened, it could have changed the course. And I think that was the crucial game.
Definitely.
I think, like you're saying, the learning thing for Steve Clarke is that his team selection in the first game was appallingly bad.
His tactics last night were all wrong as well.
And I think the substitutions last night, I mean, that game was crying out for James Forrest.
Definitely.
I was sitting with Richie and I was like, James Forrest, Stephen O'Donnell, like, just make that right now at like the sort of 60-minute mark.
Yep. And they harm to Stephen O'Donnell, like, he wasn't great against the Czech Republic, but there was a number of players that were in that ballpark. I think we were set up tactically incorrect. I think we, you know, first home game, you know, in whatever 28 years or however the fuck long it was, it's one of them where you're like, I'd have liked to have seen us being a wee bit more adventurous. Now I know like Clark historically has very much been like, make my team very hard to beat first of all. Like so I know like that's what he does, right? Fair play. But when you get 3 games to make history and 2 of them are at Hampden, like playing 5 at the back and sitting and waiting for breaks and, you know, putting balls to Dykes, and fair play to him. I mean, I think they said last night he'd won an average of like 22 headers a game, and the closest person to him was like 12 and a half or something in the stats. So I mean, like in the air, the guy, like you say, he did his job very, very well. But we just need a bit more than that. And there was players like, we look at Christie, who's not had a great season but has been good for Scotland. Fraser, again, has had injury issues like Forrest, but again, when they've turned out for Scotland, they've taken chances and scored like big goals. To have not seen any of those players in the last 2 games particularly was baffling to me. Where you're looking for width, you're looking for, you know, quality in that sort of final third, and you've got 3 at least Premier League quality players sitting on the bench who are all capable of goals, are all capable of creating, just, you know, sitting there twiddling their thumbs, and then we're bringing defenders on when we're 3-1 down and stuff like that, and you're just like pure, the fuck is happening here, you know what I mean? Like, so
I mean,
I think Clark needs to be more flexible, because after the Czech game he came out and was full-throated in his defence of Stephen O'Donnell, which I get, they work together at Kilmarnock, he's his guy, like, I don't have any issue with him coming out, because him coming out and being like, no, he's talking shit about O'Donnell, you don't have a clue, brought out probably one of the performances of the guy's lifetime at Wembley. Like,
absolutely,
so managerially, like man management wise, it was a great move.
Just tactically.
But like, fair enough, he's got that one. Everybody had to eat their words that night. But he gets stubborn and he picked him again against Croatia when, as you say, maybe, or even going with like a back 4 where O'Donnell's a more defensive minded and allowing you to bring a Forrest or a Fraser or a Christie or somebody in to give that bit of forward width and still maintain a bit of defensive stability. I think would have been more, but he'd dug in. He'd made the point that O'Donnell was his guy and that he believed in him and all blah blah. And you're like, you need to be more flexible. You cannot have this mindset where you are, everything is set in stone and it's going to be your way, because you can't qualify for major tournament later stages by just not getting beat.
Aye, it didn't seem like to me the last night that he had a game plan for going behind like that either. It kind of felt like when we went behind 3-1, 2-1, 3-1, that he kind of just threw threw some people on, you know. It didn't feel like there was like a cohesive plan in MU. I think it kind of, as much as the guy's an absolute fucking legend forevermore and his job should not be in question.
No, people asking for him to walk need to take a serious look at themselves. Scotland are in a position just now where
who else, man?
The Nations League has allowed us back into major tournaments, but it's also put us alongside the likes of Finland and North Macedonia, so we need to have a bit of a reality check in that respect, where it's great to be back and we can build and we have potential. We have 2/3 of a great team. Some of the older guys maybe need to move on, but is there younger guys there to replace them? I don't know is the answer right now. But it's one of them where if you're asking for Steve Clark to go, it would be like somebody asking for like Callum Davidson's seat at St Johnstone, you know what I mean, where he's come in his first year and won 2 cups and they're like, but he didn't win the league, so get him to fuck. You know what I mean? Like, that's, I'll try to make a club comparison with where Clark is now. Like your team making a cup final for the first time in 30 years and then sacking the manager because he didn't win the cup final, you know what I mean?
The thing that I started off with, mate, is that the Scotland fans that, but you know, on my Twitter feed, as much as people might want to be like, Twitter's no real, it's like, well, it is. Like, it really is. They seemed not just disappointed, which is all right, you know, like you can get your hopes up, but actually angry and shit like that. Colin for a manager said when it's been fucking 98, you know.
He's the most successful manager in 2 generations.
Stratton couldn't do it, McLeish couldn't do it. Like,
so the chat we had in the group chat last night was that I think those managers could have done it had the Nations League been an actual option at that time.
Right.
Because I think Stratton and Eck came very close.
Especially Alex McLeish.
And I think those teams, it took like a pure last 10-minute goal against Italy to stop us, you know, when McLeish.
We get cheated out of qualification with McLeish almost with that fucking penalty.
And then Stratton, had he actually picked Celtic players for the start of the campaign rather than halfway through when everybody was ready to crucify him, I think Stratton's team especially if Nations League had been available to them, would have definitely found a way.
Get very close.
So the landscape has changed, and it is easier to qualify now, or there's more wiggle room for how you get there. But at the same time, the hypothetical we were having in the group chat last night was, would Strachan and McLeish have made it had the Nations League been there? And I think they would have.
I think it's a real shame that. I was talking to Richie about this last night. I think Kieran Tierney's the best player on that team. Like Andy Robertson for me is a bit of a what's his face that used to play for Man United, that played for Scotland.
Fletcher.
I like Darren Fletcher. Where if you put him in a team with other amazing players, he'll be amazing, and he'll be. I mean, for Liverpool's Andy Robertson's an incredible player. But last night, and against the Czechs, he was fucking anonymous, man. And Kieran Tierney is see when he plays, and you can see it, he changes as soon as the difference in the team when he comes in. He's a real driving force. And as an attacking entity, I feel like he's just better. Like for the Klopp gets the very best out of Andy Robertson, and Andy Robertson fits into that system at Liverpool like a jigsaw piece.
He's also playing with like three probably the top 10 strikers in the world. You know what I mean?
Kieran Tierney, I think he's wasted at that left centre back position. This is the thing, is that when I said that last night, they were like, whoa, but I'm like, no, don't get me. He's world class in that position as well. But in that Scotland team, I think he would be better in the attacking position to really try and get us a goal. But the problem is that Robertson can't play that left centre back. He's not as versatile as Tierney, and I think that's a real fucking shame.
I think they were building a nice rapport on the left side prior to Tierney's injury, especially in some of the build-up matches. You know, you're getting like overlapping centre backs and stuff like that, which is just, you know, like pure Brazilian-esque. You know what I mean, like that. But I don't know. Like, I've been very much like, I appreciate Andy Robertson as a player. I think in the first 20 to 30 minutes against the Czech Republic, I think he was absolutely dynamite myself. I think he was a real driving force in that early hangman, but I think when we lost the goal, the entire team just deflated, and Andy included. But it was the captaincy that was the issue for me with Robertson, because I look at somebody like John McGinn and that drive, that just determination in the middle of the park to just put his body on the line and just really like lead for the front. That when that decision was made, I personally was like, it would have been John McGinn for me, just as a personal opinion. But throughout the course of the tournament, I've actually like listened to a lot of Andy Robertson's interviews, seen a lot of him in the press and online and stuff like that, post-match and so on and so forth. And I think he carried himself as a captain really well.
Absolutely, mate. I've
actually changed my mind where, there's questions about Tierney and Robertson. I think it can work. I think it has worked. And I think as the years progress, you're probably going to see a really fucking amazing partnership with the two of them. But my doubt was with his leadership qualities. But after the tournament and how eloquently he's spoken and how inclusive he's been of the team and, you know, all that kind of stuff, like, I've actually really kind of been like, okay, you forget as a football fan that you only see what's happening on the pitch.
Absolutely.
You don't see what's happening in the dressing room. You don't see what's happening in the training camp. You know what I mean?
Apparently, Andy Robertson's the pure talisman in the dressing room, and he's behind all the sort of coming together that we've seen.
So you only see that on the pitch, and that's when I was saying about McGinn, you know, chipping in with goals, and I was like, I was just basing it on what I'm seeing on the park. You know what I mean?
For sure. But I think we can't mention the Euros and no mention Billy Gilmore, because, like, see last night, that midfield three, I mean, first of all, again, if we're going back to tactics, why the fuck is Stuart Armstrong playing as a number 8 for me? That's wild, because anytime that guy's been getting played out of position for Southampton, for Celtic, as he did constantly under like Dyler, like,
out in wide areas and stuff like that. He
just doesn't perform. He again, I think, like, going back to sort of Lyndon Dykes, Stuart Armstrong is very, very good. I wouldn't go so far to say world class, but he's very, very good at a specific role in a team. And if he doesn't fit, if you can't fit him in like that, you shouldn't play him. Because he's a missing jersey sometimes in these different positions. But tell you the one thing that was missing for me last night, and you touched on it because we ended up going long because of it, is that Billy Gilmore was really the link between the central defence and Cal McGregor and John McGinn. So he was the one that was going back and being like, give me the ball.
Yep.
And under pressure. So that's the hardest. Scott Brown did it at Celtic under Rodgers, where he would be the one
Pivot,
to take
find a pass.
to take the responsibility of taking the ball, and he's got 2 or 3 players running about him, turning and finding the pass, or maybe even just shifting out wide. But I feel like that was really missing, and that's what Billy Gilmore did like phenomenally at Wembley. But I mean, other than that, and I mean, how does a fucking, what age is that guy?
I think like 18, 19, 20 in that ballpark.
See, when I was that age, man, I was like a Wayne.
Aye.
And that guy pretty much was like the maestro at Wembley. I think he get man of the match, deserved it.
Oh, aye.
I think he was the best player on the park. And it just blows my mind, absolutely blows my mind that a guy, 18, 19-year-old, can go there and have that confidence under that pressure, but not even just to win man in a match, whatever, but in that role, that sort of linchpin role right in the middle of the park that goes to the 3 centre-halves, like, give me the ball, gives them that out ball, and then dictates where the play's going to go.
No, he's clearly going to be a quality player. I'm pleased for him. Obviously, he moved down south at a very young age. And, you know, questions were asked about how much game time he was going to get. And I think those questions have been pretty emphatically answered. I mean, I think Chelsea's transfer ban was probably like a real blessing for him, because there was a year under Lampard where they couldn't buy any players. So, you know, they had to work with Gilmore and Abrams and, you know, Mason Mount and all these guys that maybe no have got a sniff had Chelsea been able to still throw 200-300 million quid about in the summer, you know what I mean? Like, so I think maybe there's also a kind of confluence of events as well, you know what I mean? I think we need to be careful now. Scottish football, every football goes daft for a wonder kid. You know what I mean? Everybody, we've had it from McGeady to Fleck and, you know, so on and so forth. And like, I think we need to be careful of the expectation we put on the boy, because he's clearly benefited for going down to London and actually playing at a really high level at a very young age. And I think that shows in Wembley, because Chelsea are there regularly for League Cups and FA Cups and, you know, so on and so forth. Like, it's an environment where, you know, he was familiar, and I think all of that's played a part amongst all the other sort of myriad of factors. But right now, you need to understand that Chelsea can spend money again and are throwing about on Havertz and...
Well, this is,
you know what I mean?
This was going to be my next question, is that where do we see his club career actually progressing? Because that's exactly what I was thinking, as their transfer ban comes up, they're going to throw money, they're going to try and win the league next year.
Spent hundreds of millions this year.
Right,
you know what I mean?
And you know, we look at Man City putting in a 100 million bid for Kane. You know, Chelsea are going to buy it as well. Like they do every summer when they can. And I would like to see him go somewhere where he could actually develop. I don't think he should leave the Premier League, but I would quite like to see him go somewhere.
I'd probably see somewhere like a loan or whatever, maybe, depending on who they sign. But it's clearly no hurting him being about the squad and no playing as regularly as you might like.
I'd like him to
you know
go
what I mean?
Think of some of the players to be in the same squad as McGinn and play with McGinn regularly.
Aye, well, that would be nice.
I was saying that last night. Like, if somebody was to go, well, he can go anywhere, where would you want him to go? Send him to Villa and clearly get to play with somebody that could help him, you know, is maybe a couple of years ahead of him. And
can you imagine that, like, Tuchel's priority is Scotland's central midfield partnership? You know what I mean? Like, it'd be nice if it was, but who knows? You would say that's the logical. I don't think he's going to leave Chelsea. He is clearly a rising star, but depending on who they sign, it might be prudent for him to go out and actually, as you say, get first team experience more regularly in the Premier League, and then go back and, you know, sort of fight for his place, because I don't think they've invested the time and energy in him. And when you see, obviously, you know, guys like Mount and Chilwell having to, you know, isolate because after the match they were, you know, socialising with Gilmore, like, he's clearly like part of that squad. So I don't think he's going to move, but he's young enough to go out and maybe pick up a year here, a year there, come back.
That's absolutely, that's what I was thinking, like a year's loan to Villa or something like that, you know, like no moving permanently. But I mean, just as we're like wrapping up, I wanted to just sort of mention and talk about, I mean, it's been an incredible like month. So on the Euros, I'm just super proud. I like the way that the nation's actually conducted itself as well. Like for the scenes that we've seen in London, to like, you know, the fan zones and not one bit of fucking trouble, and the recent stuff, the bad press that Scottish football fans have had. I'm just really proud with the last couple of weeks, but something that's made me even more proud is that, I mean, I don't know if you, I know you don't keep up in UFC, but Paul Craig.
Oh no, he won the other week pretty convincingly, didn't he?
Fucking snapped the guy's arm in an armbar, and was the ref didn't stop the match, and he was punching the guy about the head, and the arm was flopping about. Thankfully, it was a dislocated elbow,
right?
But the guy's arm isn't mush, you know, and it looks like he's got a 6-week recovery, and the guy's going to be back.
Good.
There was like videos of him and Paul, because they're in a bubble.
Yep.
Like, for like whatever, him and Paul Craig having drinks after it and like hugging each other. And that. But this guy has went for like 3 defeats on the bounce, and people being like, his contract's at jeopardy, he's going to need to go to Bellator, whatever, take a step back. Get a sports psychologist and a nutritionist in, and he's now like fucking 5-0, moving into the top 10. 2 more wins, he'll be getting a title shot. Like, this guy has turned it around. It's so good to see. But the big one, fucking Tom Stoltman won World's Strongest Man yesterday.
I've seen that as well.
I mean, this guy's autistic, you know, like neurodivergent. All the, you know, doubts and what's he going to do, and just to overcome it all.
World's Strongest Man is like
ridiculous, mate.
One of the things I remember watching many a year, like at Christmas and New Year, it used to be on, and you'd sit there like on whatever bank holiday it was, watching the World's Strongest Man. Like, so it's still something that I'm glad it still has like an affection in people's hearts and stuff like that, because that was like big news that was very sort of like massively received during the week as well.
For sure, man.
And so fair play to him and the team. You know what I mean?
For sure. I mean, I think him and his brother were top 10. I mean, Luke Stoltman's like a pure trailblazer as far as like British strongman, along with Eddie Hall. Like, he's one of the big names, as much as Eddie Hall's more a celebrity, you know, now than what he is doing, because he's not doing strongman. He's got to do one of these celebrity boxing events, you know. He's fighting the guy Thor. See the guy that played the Mountain in Game of Thrones? Like, they're due to fight each other. See, to be honest, mate, I've watched training videos. Eddie Hall's going to get fucking leathered, because this guy Thor can actually box. Eddie Hall looks like a fucking granny trying to box. I mean, he's a big guy, and if I get into the ring, he would leather fuck out, mate. I'm not saying that, but see his actual movement, his athletic ability.
You imagine when you get to that size, like being up on your toes.
If you look
for
at the guy
Thor,
it's like fucking, he must be, I don't know, like, he must have the genetics, whereas Eddie Hall's just get the pure mindset to get that big and strong. But this guy's moving really well, like, so I think he might do him. But I mean, there just seems to be this big wave, a sort of positivity in Scotland, and sports has really been like a big part of it.
Seeing the Waynes or your Facebook and your Twitter with their Scotland jerseys on and their face painted and all the rest of it was fun. Because like my Alex is 17, so she's never seen, 23 years it was, we said, wasn't it? She's never seen Scotland, and she wasn't interested in watching the matches, but it's the only time she's ever come in for school or whatever it is and being like, pure, how did Scotland get on the day? Or like, she's no interest in Celtic, doesn't ask football questions. Other than, are you going to
failed? You failed as a dad?
No, I let her make her own mind up on shit. But we did take her to the football one time and she fell asleep, didn't she? And we missed fucking Henrik Larsson's hat-trick, didn't we? In a fucking friendly. So that was the last time I took her. Cost me 2 Henrik goals, a bitch. But anyway.
Clip.
No, it's alright. I call her a wee bitch all the time.
No, I'm saying clip that so you can send it to her.
Right.
Do you remember this?
But she was coming in and being like, how did Scotland go? Were they playing the day? Like, when is it they're playing? And, you know, these other kinds. So even for somebody like her who has no interest, it's permeated the kind of ether for a lot of people.
Which is important, I think.
Seeing a new generation of young Scotland fans like take up the game, take up an interest in the national team is definitely quite pleasing, because, I mean, do you remember fucking France 98? Where, you know, your mates had your Scotland jerseys, but you had your second team, and I was laughing at James Maguire last night, like 10 minutes after full time. He was doing the Go Radio thing in the Radisson Red, and 10 minutes after full time, he'd done a wee sort of video where it was his Scotland jersey on the table, and he whipped the Scotland jersey away and there was a Germany tap underneath it, and he was pure like too soon, and I was like, pure took me back to like sitting in Space Street, like kicking balls about with the lads, and like somebody's got a Sweden tap on, somebody's got a Germany, and you've all like coordinated so that you don't have the same football taps and stuff like that, you know what I mean? Like, unless there's an absolute stottery of tap that everybody's buying, you know what I mean? Like, and that was a really fond place to like drift back to when I had that conversation, and it's nice to know that is happening for so many young Scottish kids out there now,
sure.
where other, the letter to the First Minister or whatever to go and let Wayne's watch it in school, primary school, was like a wee lovely sort of human interest thing. And
it's a shame that it took a bit of a political of like, is this like propaganda, getting the TV wheel done and getting the Wayne's watching the Scotland game, and it's like, right, okay, like maybe it's just the fact that we've not been there for 23 years and we want to celebrate it. But I'm with you, man, like it's encouraging, and I hope that we can keep it up. But I think like the big lesson that like I think we could take as a nation, especially for like the Paul Craig and the Tom Stoltman sort of story, is that it's a mentality. It's a real mentality, and if we as a nation can have a real positive mentality, we can do whatever we like. We don't need to listen to people telling us that we can't do this and we can't, and things are impossible because
too poor, too stupid.
Exactly, it's bullshit. It's absolute fucking bullshit. And I thought that Tom Stoltman seeing the images of him and just thinking, fuck me, man, like that is literally, he's the best in the world at lifting shit. You know what I mean?
It's kind of minimising it slightly, then.
Really? No, fuck, man, I don't
World's
think so,
strongest man sounds way better than the best in the world at lifting shit. Although I probably would like a belt with that on it.
Aye, aye, mate, it's been good to get back and good to chat.
It has. Aye, we need to. I'm not going to be too hard on us. Like, shit happens. You know what I mean? Like, we aim for every week. It would be great if we could do it every single time, but it's sometimes it's just not going to be possible. But it's been great to get back in. It's been great to get like mind-controlled robots off my chest. So it has. Like, I've now let that go. That's out in the universe now. So it is. And it's been great fun watching the Euros. I'm going to continue on now with the rest of the tournament. I think Italy look unstoppable at this stage. I mean, France looked extremely tidy in their first game against Germany, where VAR basically ruined what would have ordinarily have been an all-time classic Euros game. You know what I mean? France had 2 goals chopped off that. They were, they should have been chopped off, but I think pre-VAR they wouldn't have been. And you would have been looking at France 3, Germany 0 and being like, pure, this is an all-time classic match. You know what I mean? So I think that's something we need to think about with the technology side of it again, just to kind of like bring it full circle. But I think as it stands, the Italians look just absolutely unstoppable.
Aye, Mancini's playing very well.
Mancini is just my absolute fucking style icon. See, when I'm that dude's age, I want big, grey, wavy fucking hair, and I want to be cutting about in like tailored suits. He's just a pure cool icon, man.
Aye, man.
So
he's cool as fuck. And it's like Man City, Guardiola and Mancini. They've had two of the most stylish managers.
Aye.
But two of them incredible at their job. But mate, that was class, man.